Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, dreaming that someone was watching you? Was it a dream? Or the rake was ready to give you the goodnight kiss? My son Eli was 4 years old when he started telling us about the tall man in his room. 4-year-olds have rich interior lives. Eli had carried an imaginary friend, a dog named Pepper, since the age of 3, and Pepper featured heavily in daily life and occasionally took the blame for minor household incidents. We were experienced parents by then. We understood child development. When Eli mentioned the tall man who sat in his room at night, we did what informed, reasonable parents do. We validated his feelings, explained the difference between dreams and waking life, left the hallway light on, and filed it under normal developmental behavior. We should have paid closer attention to the details. We'd moved to our current house the spring Eli turned 4, a quiet Ohio suburb where the lots back up to a strip of old deciduous forest the development was built around rather than through. Eli loved his room. Morning light, a window seat he immediately claimed. The first 3 weeks were good, in the unremarkable way that good weeks are good. The first mention of the tall man came in week 4. I was putting him to bed when he asked if his friend was coming tonight. I asked which friend. He said the tall man who sits in the corner and watches him sleep. I looked at the corner, nothing, and told him there was no one there. He said he knew that the tall man only came after the lights went off. I asked if he'd spoken to him. Eli said the tall man didn't talk, he just watched. I told my wife. We agreed. Unusual imaginary friend, monitor, and reassess. The details Eli offered over the next 3 weeks didn't behave the way imaginary friend details usually behave. They didn't evolve creatively or incorporate things from books or television. They narrowed and sharpened. He said the tall man had no clothes on. He said his skin was white like paper. He said the fingers were very, very long. When I asked how long he spread his own hands as wide as they'd go, and said, "Longer than this, Daddy, much, much longer." He said the man always crouched in the corner because he was too tall to stand up straight in the room, and that sometimes he crouched next to the bed instead of the corner, and Eli didn't like that as much. In week 6, Eli stopped staying in his own room. Not in a distressed way, no crying, no tantrums, just appearing silently at our bedside at whatever hour and climbing in. When I carried him back, he'd go without protest and be in our bed again by morning. He told me the tall man had a smell now, like something old, and that he'd moved from the corner all the way to next to the bed and was watching Eli's face from very close. My wife wanted to call someone, pediatrician, child psychologist, someone with credentials. I was nearly there. But first I drove to an electronics store and bought a security camera. I set it up while Eli was at preschool, positioned on the bookshelf with a full room field of view, connected to my phone, night vision capable. I told Eli there was a new light on his shelf, but nothing else. That night he asked if his friend was coming. I said I didn't think so. He looked at the camera for a moment without saying anything, and then went to sleep. I checked the footage the next morning at 6 while my wife and Eli were still asleep. Eli was in bed, sleeping normally. The room was still. At 3:14 a.m., the footage showed a shape in the corner. I've thought about how to describe what I saw on that recording, and I don't think there is a clean way to do it. Something was in the corner, white enough to register clearly on the infrared. Folded into the corner with too many angles, the posture of something that has too many joints and uses them in ways joints aren't intended to operate. The fingers, where they touched the floor in front of it, were the thing I kept coming back to, the thing that made it impossible to explain away. Spread flat on the floor for balance, each one disturbingly, wrongly long in a way the infrared made unmistakably clear. Not a shadow, not a lens artifact. Fingers. It occupied the corner for 47 minutes. In the frame where it was present and the frame where it was not there is no detectable transition. It was there, and then it was not. I sat in the kitchen and watched that 47-minute clip 4 times before I woke my wife. We have not spent a night in that house since. We told Eli we were staying at Grandma's for a while, and he accepted this without question. In the car, 20 minutes into the drive, he asked from his car seat whether he thought his friend would know how to find Grandma's house. I told him I didn't know. He looked out the window and said he thought probably yes. 4 months later, I was organizing files on my laptop and found a cloud backup from our porch camera I hadn't reviewed. It had a partial angle on Eli's bedroom window. Motion triggered. The backup went back 6 weeks before I installed the room camera. On 11 separate nights in that 6-week window, at times between 3 and 4 a.m., the porch camera had recorded a shape at Eli's window. At the glass, looking in. The room camera I installed to see what was inside the room. I had never thought to look at what was coming in from outside. Eli is in kindergarten now. His teacher mentioned at the first parent conference that he was a happy, settled child. She said the only thing she'd noted was that he drew the same figure repeatedly during free art. Very tall, white, long fingers, crouching. She'd asked him what it was. He said it was his friend. She asked if his friend had a name. Eli said no, but that his friend had followed them to the new neighborhood and was very patient. She wrote that word in her notes. Patient. She showed me the drawing. I told her it was a phase. I folded it and put it in my jacket pocket, and I haven't been able to throw it away. The thing that stays with me most isn't the night I saw it. It's the 3 months before that night. All the individual details I noticed and explained away, each one reasonable in isolation, none of them reasonable in aggregate, and the way I chose to see them in isolation, rather than as a pattern, because the pattern had an implication I wasn't ready for. I've lived alone in my house in western Michigan for 4 years. A 2-bedroom on a curved suburban street, where the lots are generous enough that you can't quite see your neighbor's windows, and the back of the property runs up to a narrow green belt of old forest, maybe 50 feet of trees before the next road. I like the privacy of it. I like the trees. I stopped liking them in December. The first sign was the waking. Sometime in September, I began waking at night for no reason I could identify. Not from sound, not from a dream, simply waking, completely alert, at around 3 in the morning. I'd lie in the dark for a while, feel nothing in particular, go back to sleep. It happened 2 or 3 times a week with enough consistency that I noticed it. I attributed it to work stress and the particular insomnia that arrives uninvited in your mid-30s. The second sign was the smell. A smell in the bedroom I couldn't locate. Present on some mornings when I woke, not all of them. Faint, organic, sweet in a way that decay isn't usually sweet. Underneath the animal smell was something almost floral that was wrong, rather than pleasant. I checked under the bed, in the closet, behind the furniture. I called a pest control company. They found nothing. The smell continued intermittently, and I stopped trying to find its source. The third sign was Leo. My basset hound had slept in the bedroom every night for 8 years. His bed was in the corner by the closet, and he had used it without exception. In October, he stopped sleeping there. He began sleeping in the hallway with his back against the bedroom door, facing outward. I thought the radiator noise was bothering him and moved his bed to the hallway. He accepted this and slept there peacefully, and I noted it as a mild behavioral change and moved on with my life. He wasn't bothered by the radiator. He was unwilling to be in that room. He knew something I didn't know, and I gave him a different bed instead of asking why. There were other signs I've cataloged since. Objects on the nightstand consistently slightly moved from where I left them. A glass of water I kept by the bed each night consistently half empty in the morning when I hadn't woken thirsty. The bedroom feeling colder than the hallway at certain hours in a way that didn't correspond to the drafts or the heating cycle. Each of these things had an explanation. I used the explanations. The night I saw it was a Thursday in December. I woke at 3:17 a.m., completely alert, same as every other night. Lay on my back for 30 seconds looking at the ceiling, then turned over. It was standing at the bedside, between the bed and the window, on the side closest to the wall, approximately 4 feet from my face. I was fully awake. I've turned this question over more times than I can count, and I always arrive at the same answer. I had been awake for at least half a minute before I turned. I could feel the cold air in the room and the specific texture of my pillowcase. I was completely, entirely awake when I saw what was standing beside my bed. The height of it first, bent at the neck to clear the ceiling, which put the full extension at over 7 feet. The color, which was not white the way paint or paper is white, but white the way something is white when pigment has been entirely removed. Structural whiteness, the whiteness of bone under very thin covering. Hairless. Every rib pressed visibly against the inside of the skin. Each joint of the shoulder and hip and knee a distinct protrusion, as if the body had been designed as a frame rather than built as a body. The smell was present and strong, and the fingers, hanging at its sides, the hands reaching to mid-thigh, each finger 3 or 4 times the length it should be, slightly spread the way relaxed hands spread, pale and long against the dark of the room. It was looking at me with eyes that were very dark and very still, set deep in the skull, with something behind them that I can only describe as patience. We looked at each other for approximately 3 seconds. Then it was gone. No motion I could track, not a step back, not a turn, not a movement I could follow with my eyes. Present, and then absent. The room was empty, and the smell was fading, and I was alone. I lay in that bed until 7 a.m. without moving. I don't have a more dignified account of those hours than that. At 7 a.m. I got up because remaining still was no longer possible. I looked at the floor beside the bed in the daylight. Scratch marks on the hardwood. On the side of the bed closest to the window, in a concentrated area the size of a large footprint. Deep, through the finish, into the bare wood. Multiple overlapping sets of scratches, the older ones worn smooth at the edges, accumulated over time. Whatever had been standing there Thursday had been standing there many nights before Thursday. I thought about the 3 months of waking at 3 a.m. and the smell and the glass of water and Leo sleeping against the door, and I understood finally that I had been sharing my bedroom for months with something I'd chosen not to see. I haven't slept in that room since. I've had 2 people examine the scratches. Both used the phrase significant force. Neither could account for the pattern of marks. I haven't explained to either of them what made them. Leo still sleeps in the hallway with his back against the door. I've stopped trying to move his bed back inside. He knew before I did, 3 months before. And I gave him a different bed instead of asking what he was keeping himself away from. Some nights I stand in the hallway and watch him sleep against that door and try to understand what he's still listening for on the other side of it. He always seems to hear something I can't. Sarah and I moved into our house in September, after 3 years of looking and 2 years of saving. A new build on the east side of town, curved streets, generous lots, the kind of neighborhood where people plant things in the front yard and take the bins in after collection. The rear of the property backed onto 60 feet of trees before the next road began. We had a moving-in party in October and felt the particular satisfaction of people who had worked hard for something and finally had it. Sarah started sleepwalking in November. She had never done it in 7 years of sharing a bed with me. The first time I woke because her side was empty and found her in the far corner of the bedroom facing the wall, her back to the room, standing still, asleep. I said her name softly, and she turned around and walked back to bed, and in the morning remembered nothing. I told her what had happened. She was mildly concerned, chalked it up to the new job and the stress of the move. When it happened again the following week, she saw our GP. He said sleepwalking in adults was common under stress, recommended a consistent sleep schedule, said not to worry. He was a good doctor. He didn't have the information to give better advice. She walked to that corner twice a week for the next 6 weeks. Always the same corner, the far corner diagonally opposite our bed, the one closest to the window that faced the tree line. Always facing the wall with her back to the room. I started sitting up to watch. She'd stand perfectly still for 20 or 30 minutes and return to bed. I timed it on my phone. I didn't tell her I was watching. I followed her one night in January. I don't know what I expected. I think I'd convinced myself that seeing her do it while standing next to her would make it feel ordinary. I got up when she rose, followed her across the dark bedroom, and stood beside her in the corner, facing the wall the way she was facing. Then I looked at what she was facing. The rake was crouched in the corner between the wall and the dresser we'd pushed to that side of the room when we moved in. It had been using the space behind the dresser, the narrow gap between it and the wall, as cover. And in that gap it occupied a volume that shouldn't have held it, folded into the angles the space permitted with a flexibility that required something other than a normal skeleton. White, hairless, the ridge of its spine visible under the pale, stretched skin, its head tilted up to look at Sarah and then, processing my presence, rotating slowly to include me. The fingers of one hand rested flat on the floor for balance, spread wide, each one laid out in its full, impossible length on the hardwood. It was completely silent. In all the time I stood there, I did not hear it breathe. The smell came to me all at once, sweet over animal, thick and close. I had been smelling it faintly in the bedroom for weeks. Sarah had said once she liked the smell of the new house, something organic and woody. I had agreed. I did not move. I could not produce a response that felt connected to the situation in any way. Sarah stood asleep beside me, oriented toward the thing in the corner the way a compass needle orients toward north. And I stood awake and looked at it, and it looked at me with dark, sunken eyes that moved between us with the unhurried attention of something conducting an assessment. Then it was gone. Not a movement I could follow, a discontinuity, the same frame containing it and then not containing it, the corner empty, the smell fading. Sarah standing beside me in the dark, asleep. She went back to bed. I sat on the floor for a long time. In the morning, she had no memory. She never does. I looked behind the dresser in the daylight. On the baseboard at floor level, on both walls of that corner, there were scratches, concentrated, deep, overlapping. The accumulated work of something that had braced repeatedly in that corner over an extended period. The oldest scratches had dust settled into them. These had been made long before September, long before us. I contacted the previous owners through the real estate agent. They'd listed the house after 18 months, well under the 5 years they'd told the agent they intended to stay. I sent a message through the agent, asking if they'd experienced anything unusual in the master bedroom. The reply came 3 days later. 4 words. Don't use that corner. No explanation, no follow-up. I replied asking what they meant. They never responded. Sarah had a full sleep study done in March. The results were completely normal. No abnormal activity, no sleepwalking in the lab, all readings clean. The sleep specialist said she was one of the better sleepers he'd tested. He said she only walked in her own home. He said some people were sensitive to their environment, and that perhaps our bedroom configuration was disrupting something. I moved the dresser back against the wall. I leave it there now because I have decided that what uses that corner uses it, whether I acknowledge it or not. And not seeing the scratches is the only accommodation I have left to offer myself. Last week, Sarah told me she'd been thinking about how well she sleeps in this house, better than any place she'd lived before. She said she always felt watched over somehow, like something was looking out for her. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I told her that was good, that she should hold on to that feeling. I didn't tell her she was right, and I didn't tell her what it meant.